California Governor Gavin Newsom has arguably become the face of the Democratic Party's struggle to rebuild its image and fight the Trump administration. He's front and center in a red state versus blue state redistricting battle that's part of a no-holds-barred approach to taking on his political opponents. The latest example, Bed Bath & Beyond recently announced it would not open stores in California during its rebranding effort due to the state's regulatory environment. Newsom responded that he, like most Americans, thought they no longer existed. Julia Manchester, national political reporter here at The Hill, joins me to discuss. Julia, so Newsom is widely considered to be a presidential contender in 2028. What do you make of the way he's been going on offense?
Yeah, Drew, this is essentially Newsom trying to fill a leadership void within the Democratic Party. Of course, the Democratic Party can point to DNC Chair Ken Martin as being their natural leader, but it's not the same high-profile figure position like you have with Donald Trump leading the Republican Party. Right now, they are trying to figure out where their North Star is and who can lead them to that North Star. You've had, other figures like Zohran Mamdani, the mayoral candidate on the Democratic side in New York City, floated for that potential position. But Mamdani is obviously appealing toward a smaller segment of Democrats, progressive Democrats. So you have more of a national name like Gavin Newsom really looking to step into that void. And we've seen he's done this ever since the redistricting battle really took center stage in Texas, with Newsom positioning California as the state that would take Texas on in this battle. And ever since then, we've seen Newsom lean into his social media presence and maybe his vocabulary, you could say, in public speaking and online, and trying to mock Donald Trump and trying to sound like him. He uses phrases like low energy, weak, phrases and words and vocabulary that is really meant to needle Donald Trump. His tweets from his press office are in all caps, mimicking the way Donald Trump posts on Truth Social. So this is very much Gavin Newsom, I think, trying out a strategy as Democrats figure out who their leader is. And in this moment, at least for right now, the leader seems to be Gavin Newsom.
You know, it's kind of hard to measure how much this might be resonating with the public at large, but at least online, where politics does play out in a certain sense, he seems to kind of, have found something that he's doing is working and gaining traction.
Absolutely. And I think, when we look at the online, base, the online presence is obviously very important. But you're right. It's very difficult to see how much traction this is gaining with Democrats on the ground in battleground states or even early presidential primary states. I will say, though, last month, Newsom was on the ground in the early primary state of South Carolina, and he did draw a decent crowd and got, relatively positive reviews from that town hall appearance or that event that he held. So I think there is some excitement for Newsom, but at the same time, look, California is seen as the quintessential blue state. We see Republicans constantly, sort of stomp on California as being out of touch with the rest of the country, being overly liberal, too far to the left. So that's something that Newsom is going to have to be very cognizant of as he travels the country, assuming he will, ahead of 2028 and considers his presidential bid.
It seems to me that there is going to be a big test for Newsom in this redistricting battle. He's going to put this new map before voters, and they are either going to support it or reject it. If they reject it and he loses before even kind of getting started with that redistricting battle, it could be a pretty big blow to his political aspirations.
Yeah, it's a very big risk that Newsom is taking, and we're seeing that, a majority of Americans, and I believe also a large swath of Californians, look at that independent redistricting commission, which would essentially be done away with if, for the time being, if Newsom gets his way with this vote. They like that independent redistricting commission. They like that it is nonpartisan and down the middle. So we'll see if what happens with that vote. It would certainly be a risk risk for Newsom, but Newsom appears to be obviously willing to take that risk. He seems to have been tapped into, a part of the Democratic Party that has really been looking, or I shouldn't even say a part of the Democratic Party. He's been tapping into energy that has been absent, I think, from Democrats over the past 8 months or so, an energy that's needed to push back against Donald Trump. And redistricting seems to be that issue that galvanizes Democrats and really gets them on the same page.
This little spat that he had with Bed Bath & Beyond seems like to me that it represents maybe some of the baggage that he will bring with him if he tries to run for national office. It's been a criticism that he's received in the past that California creates a negative regulatory environment.
That's absolutely true, and we've seen that Bed Bath & Beyond has, explained their decision for not, opening stores in California is because it's just expensive, and they don't feel that it is worth the investment. So it makes sense if you're a Republican to really seize on that and, use it to essentially push back on California and tie it to Newsom and his policies. That being said, though, I do think Newsom's response was clever because we know that Bed Bath & Beyond has, filed for bankruptcy. They are no longer the giant retailer they used to be. They've been replaced, I think, with other retailers online like Amazon, for example. So I think Newsom found himself on pretty solid footing to punch back against that criticism that he was seeing. But, I think there is this perception in other parts of the country, in more maybe purple or red parts of the country, that there is this regulatory environment in California that may not be good for the economy as a whole. So Newsom's going to have to figure out how to message to those voters who might be skeptical of that.
And not just on the regulatory front, handling of COVID, the homelessness. He's even received criticism from progressives on that issue, cost of living in California, housing, taxes. I wonder if you think just continue to punch back similar to the way that Donald Trump did during his 2 campaigns. Maybe Democrats like Newsom have kind of learned something like that to lead with a strong right hook.
Yeah, I think that's what you're seeing from Newsom, and I think Newsom is trying to maybe adopt that, trait from Donald Trump in terms of punching back. That being said, though, one negative aspect I hear quite a bit, or negative trait I hear quite a bit about Gavin Newsom from strategists, from operatives, or even voters is he lacks the authenticity that maybe Donald Trump has. It's interesting, Drew, just 8 months ago, Gavin Newsom was here in the nation's capital, or 7 months ago, here in the nation's capital, asking Donald Trump and Republicans and Democrats on Capitol Hill for federal aid to fight wildfires. And of course, in that position, he's trying to appear more amicable, more conciliatory towards the president. So I think there's this risk of running the tape with Gavin Newsom, and you see these 2 very different Gavin Newsoms, and that could end up hurting him in the long term. That's something you don't get with Donald Trump. Donald Trump is pretty consistent in his communication style.
All right, I think we're going to have a lot of time to talk about Gavin Newsom over the next several years, but for now, we'll leave it at that. Julia Manchester, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.